So, welcome everyone. My name is Nick, and I am a member of the Robbinsdale Robbinsdale for Racial Justice Group, and I'm a resident of Ward 3 near Lee Park. I want to thank you all for joining us this afternoon, and I especially want to thank George Selman, our Robbinsdale mayoral candidate, for speaking with us today. The intention of this meeting is to allow for a space to talk about racial justice and equality issues, equity issues, as they pertain to our elected officials ahead of our primary elections coming on August 11th. Several members of the Robbinsdale for Racial Justice Group have come up with these series of questions, and I presented these questions to the candidates a couple days ago. We are here to listen and become informed voters. And for those of us who are white members of the community, we are here to be better allies to our neighbors who are Black, Indigenous, and people of color. With that said, we will allow space for follow-up questions from the audience at the end. White people will defer and listen to BIPOC members when they have something to say. This meeting is recorded. As you can see, the recording icon on the screen. You'll notice that the audience microphones are turned off for the first part of our meeting. And then at the end of the meeting, you'll be invited to ask follow-up questions where I'll unmute your mic upon waving to indicate that you want to be unmuted. The meeting of the structure is as followed. In a moment, Mr. Selman will have 5 minutes to introduce himself with an opening statement. I'll spend 30 minutes asking questions that we voted on. Then we'll take about 15 minutes with follow-up questions. Finally, George will have 2 minutes with closing statements, and we'll wrap up the meeting. George, thank you so much for being here. Will you please introduce yourself and give the opening statement?
Thank you very much, Nick. And thank you all for attending tonight, and thanks to the whole group for this important work that you're doing, and it really allows us as mayoral candidates to have these very important conversations with people that really want to be informed. And that when you're running for anything, those are the ones you want to get to, and it really helps people understand who we are. As I answer your questions tonight, you know, Nick and I were talking briefly before the meeting, and I thought how nice it was to get these questions ahead of time, because they're important questions. They're not easy questions. It's not, why do we have single vendor trash service or some basic city question we get all the time. It's, these are questions that require thought, and I pledged you to be open and honest through these to make sure that I'm speaking from the heart and not just from a campaign position. Again, my name is George Selman. My pronouns are he, him, his, and I'm ready to go with your questions.
All right, thank you. For the next part of our meeting, we're going to ask you a series of questions that the group has submitted and were presented to George a few days ago. By the way, all the other candidates in this meeting were presented the same question and in the same order. I'll refrain from asking any follow-up questions, but George, if any activity in the chat box that you want to address in real time, so in other words, if you see someone asking a question in real time and you feel like you want to stop and answer the question, by all means, feel free to do so. If you have any questions that tend to drag on 2 to 3 minutes, I'm going to politely say 15 seconds as an indicator to wrap up. Are you cool with that?
Yep.
Cool. All right, well, let's jump right into it with the top voted question. What are some of the racial inequalities you identify in Robbinsdale, and what metrics would you use to measure our progress in those areas?
Well, for me, racial equity is about applying justice and a little bit of common sense to a system that's been out of balance for hundreds of years. I'm 62 years old. So, I was born a white kid, and I've been raised a white kid, and I'm going to die a white guy. But at the end of the day, I've had the opportunity to expand my knowledge base, if you will, in the area of racial inequities, in large part from the work that I've done in the commercial cleaning industry over the past 40 years. And, seeing that the challenges people face on a day-to-day basis is something that I've really grown to be rather good at, because I have to help folks, and almost exclusively that are BIPOC community members, navigate those spaces and become more effective in their day-to-day life of operating their business that I help them start and I help them run as franchisees of mine. In Robbinsdale specifically, a lot of us like to think we're very progressive, but I constantly see areas where we have room to grow, where we have ways to improve. And the best way to really measure our progress in tackling these things, and like sometimes they're small things and sometimes they're very obvious things. Like sometimes it's a small thing, like a person changing the side of the street they're walking down because of the person that's coming toward them on the same side. It's a small thing, but it's an important thing. And that's not easy to change. That's going to take a lot of effort and a lot of work and a long time. But, we've got the chance to really get it to change finally. As far as ways to measure our progress in these areas, I think the ongoing regular communication from the Human Rights Commission task force. I'm very proud of the Human Rights Commission and the work they did and I watched their open meeting that they had a month or so ago. And I realized I'm not the only one that really doesn't know what to do. I mean, it's a big problem, and you're changing mindsets that are, dozens of generations long, and it's going to take a lot of effort, but we've got some traction, and I want to make sure we hold on to that. The BIPOC communities that I have, community meetings, I've been doing, I'm not waiting for the task force to get started to learn. I've been meeting with members of the BIPOC community in roundtable sessions, or some of them are one-on-one, to help shorten my learning curve on the best way for me to be not just an ally, but an effective advocate. And when I'm at these meetings, they don't listen to me talk. They listen to them talk, because they're the ones that are going to help guide me to the shortest path to make progress.
Great. Thanks. Going on to the next question here. What are the strategies that you will use to increase racial equity in Robbinsdale if elected?
Well, hiring is in City Hall and in the police department is one of the most obvious ones that need work. We have a little more of a BIPOC community member workforce than people realize. Some of them are, white passing and not obvious members, but nonetheless, I think it's important that people feel that they're represented when they walk into our city hall or when they interact with our police department. For the last several years, we've been trying very hard. We've added a police officer every year for the last 3 years to our city budget. And every year at our annual goal session that I'll talk more about later, when we talk about police staffing and the difficulty in hiring police officers period these days, and then I always ask, what efforts have we done, or what progress have we made in getting minority officers? And the cold hard truth is that we just don't get a lot of applications. Part of it's, we're not a top paying community. We try to float on the top side of the middle as far as what we pay staff. And the other is qualified, I should say, applicants that are part of the BIPOC community are being addressed or drawn to openings in bigger departments that have bigger budgets than we do. And that not just the upfront money, but they have bigger growth opportunities because they, instead of 28 officers, they've got 128 or 200. When you get into some, like the Bloomingtons and things like that, those are big police departments, and we can't really compete with that. So we just, plug away at it as best we can. And I'll talk more a little bit later about the police chief opening that's coming up as well.
All right, great. Have you done any personal work learning on the topics of racism? And if so, of what nature?
Well, I'm going to look at my notes so I don't miss anything. Personal learning about racism has really kind of been part of my life for the last 40 years. I mentioned earlier that I worked in the commercial cleaning industry my whole life prior to retirement, brief retirement, I might add. And I'm back in it. I do own a commercial cleaning franchise company with my wife, and I also own Bark and Bathe, as many of you probably know. When you sell someone a franchise, you're taking their money and you're telling them, trust me, I'm going to help you grow this and make you own a business that you can raise your level of income in your family if you do what you're supposed to do and I do what I'm supposed to do. And that's almost exclusively BIPOC families that I've been doing this with. I've started between my career and then now my current business, I've helped start over 700 franchises in the Twin Cities, and probably all but 50 or so were BIPOC families or individuals that bought these businesses, that bought these franchises and grew them as big as they could. As long as they took care of customers, they got more and bigger opportunities. Not everybody succeeded. To be clear, there's no such thing as a sure thing when it comes to starting a business. Nobody can tell you that better than me. And then, being willing to ask questions of the BIPOC community and listen, as I mentioned earlier. And I also like to read. I'm currently reading, or it's audio. I'm cheating. It's audiobooks because I drive around the city a lot, so I listen to audiobooks a fair amount. And Orders to Kill by William F. Pepper. It's about the assassination of Martin Luther King, and it's not an easy read because it's very long. I'm in chapter 29, and it just seems to be an endless book. But it's really interesting because it really talks about the topics of racism going back into the 60s and before that, and how it kind of is. It's a really good base story of how we got to where we are today.
All right, thanks. How would you hold the RPD, Robbinsdale Police Department, accountable if there were inappropriate or harmful actions?
When it comes to this, and you're speaking racially, I assume. I'm going to phrase my answer that you're speaking racially. I really have zero tolerance for it. And my best example is in my cleaning experience with the franchisees. I've had customers that were just flat out racially inappropriate with my franchise owners. And if I went above their head and if I couldn't get it fixed, they weren't customers of mine anymore. There's too many good quality customers out there to mess around with people that are living in the Stone Age. And I would treat the police department the same way.
Right. All right. Thanks. What policy changes have you contributed to in support of racial justice and equality?
Every year we have usually in February, but not always, we have an annual goals session for the city council. It's a public meeting, but I think in my 14 years on the council, I think we maybe had 6 people attend the goals session. It's a lot about talking about sewer lines and road repair and stuff. But when we had our first meeting after George Floyd's murder, I called for us adding a section to this goals session for this exact subject. I'm a little embarrassed we hadn't done it years ago. We have a great Human Rights Commission, and they guide us and advise us on issues that we send to them to evaluate, or more frequently that they bring to us. They do a great job of finding topics. And at this goals session, I want us to set goals for equity and equality and evaluate them, because we do that in our work session every month. We look at our goals in all these different categories. Okay, we said we were going to do this by the end of the first quarter. Did we do it? If not, why not? And how are we going to get it done? I want this discussion to be part of that, not just for this year, but this is a vehicle that City Council can use to maintain the traction that we've unavoidably, or unfortunately rather, found ourselves in, and it gives us a great opportunity to keep that momentum alive and keep it going for years and years to come. And I hope it continues and stays on that goal session long after I'm on the council.
Great, thanks. What would be your first action as mayor to ensure Robbinsdale is starting down the path of working towards racial equality among our residents, businesses, and schools?
Completing the work that the Human Rights Commission has started by getting the task force organized and up and running. I don't know if you all watched the City CCX Human Rights Commission meeting that I referenced earlier, but the moderator at that meeting did an amazing job. And I've already visited with our city manager that we need to do what we can within reason to keep her as our moderator, because she's already got the background education about Robbinsdale and what we're trying to do under her belt. So if we start over with somebody else, you lose some of that, and I want to make sure we maintain that. So getting that task force up and running would be one of my number one things. And then getting back to the goal session, as a council, defining, including from citizen input, defining what are our goals for 2021 and what do we want to accomplish specifically. We all have ideas. I'm still forming my ideas. I'm not going to say, the one thing that meeting taught me is I'm not the only one that doesn't know what to do. There's a lot of questions here, and it's a lot of soul searching, and it's a lot of difficult conversations. These roundtables I've been having have been an excellent tool to help me identify what's important to the BIPOC community that I otherwise would not know. I can have all the ideas in the world, but if it doesn't meet their needs, it's not going to go anywhere.
Great. I think that leads into the next question almost perfectly. How would you use Robbinsdale Human Rights Commission as a resource?
Well, they do great work, and I think I said that earlier, and it's a very important work. And it's, oftentimes, I served on 2 commissions totaling almost 15 years. And it's, back in the old days, state law allowed the city to take commissioners out to a dinner to thank them for their service. Now we provide coffee and water at the meeting. You have these volunteers that are working hard, giving up their time from their families or their businesses or their jobs or their other relaxing time off to make Robbinsdale a better place. And that's where this task force came from, is the work that needs to be done is too important and too much for them to take on, they felt. And that's why they really embraced this idea of the task force. They are volunteers, and they, we get meetings from their minutes, and we review them, and we can ask questions if we need to, but the task force will really allow us to get this work done better and faster.
Great, thanks. What changes do you envision for the Robbinsdale Police Department?
Well, the changing of our police chief at the end of this month creates an opportunity to make change from the top down within the department. And the timing, and it wasn't, Chief Franzen has done I think a very good job for a very long time, but we have a chance to move the needle if it needs to be moved a little or a lot. You know, I don't get a lot of complaints about our police department. I get a few here and there. And when I hear both sides of the story, and I listen to both sides before I respond, it's, you know, if you break the law in Robbinsdale, it may not be a pleasant experience. And I suspect that's true in New Hope, Crystal, and Golden Valley too. But that doesn't mean it can't be handled professionally and effectively. I've gone on police ride-alongs, and I've been astounded at the way the officers are trained to de-escalate. When you watch, you're sitting in the squad car in the front seat, and you've got a camera over the mirror, and you can hear what's going on, and you can see the dash cam. And the person that starts talking to the police officer is antagonistic and scared and angry and all the things that anybody might be. By the time they're cuffed and put in the back seat, they're actually chuckling a little bit with the officer. And it's not just anybody that can do that. You know, taking somebody that's really not wanting to have happen to them and make it a little more tolerable and a little more respectful is an art form. And I think that needs to be a big part of our training. And getting a police chief that perhaps thinks differently. Not that our current chief has done a bad job. Like I said, I think he's done a great job, but I think this is a chance to really change the way that the department is viewed, because that's a big part of the effectiveness of the police department, not just the job they do, but how do citizens view the job they're doing? Both citizens that are happy that someone responded to the 911 call, and even the ones that caused the 911 call. You know, there has to be respect and dignity in all this.
All right, thanks. I want to take a quick moment to say to the newcomers that we're about halfway through our initial questions, and we will have follow-up questions here soon. Please feel free to type your questions in the chat, or when we're done with these pre-prepared questions, I will unmute you and you can ask the question yourselves. And to prompt me to unmute you, you just wave at the camera like this. All right, let's keep going to these questions. Do you have any contacts or community partnerships in Robbinsdale or in other local communities that you would use as a resource to advance racial equity? If not, how would you go about creating these contacts and partnerships?
Well, you know, I've already taken that first step, as I mentioned, with these roundtables and one-on-one conversations with members of the BIPOC community. They are really astounding individuals. You know, a lot of people view that me doing this as a campaign ploy. Is part of it campaign motivated? Perhaps, but it's a very small part. People that really know me know that this isn't new to me. They know that I have no tolerance for racism, and it's something that I'm always looking to improve, not just in my life and in my family, but with my neighbors and the greater community. One of the things that are partnerships that Robbinsdale has available that goes terribly underutilized, and I'm going to refer to my notes because it's not my organization, but I want to make sure I get this right. The Annex Teen Clinic, which is located on Rockford Road, 2 blocks that way, that is a resource for Robbinsdale as a public health organization. They are a lot more than just a place to get birth control. An example of this is by listening to some of the staff at the Teen Annex. That's where I learned about the importance of using your pronouns when you're introducing yourself to people. You know, to me, I just kind of rolled my eyes and threw my hands up, and I thought, I don't get it. But you know, part of learning is getting educated and being willing to be educated. And they taught me that this is important for people to know that you recognize that you're going to respect their pronouns as well. They also offer race and racism workshops that are free and open to the public through Eventbrite, I believe, but it's all on their website. But it's really, that facility is one of the most underutilized partnerships that we have available to us right here in town. And that's the one I would virtually run to and have, perhaps attend a city council work session and kind of guide us through some of this, shortening all of our learning curves and making sure we're all on a dedicated direction and we know what we're trying to do.
All right, thanks. Here's a more broad question for you. What's your number one priority or goal as mayor?
Well, if you had asked me this at the end of May or before Memorial Day, I would have said, continue our great redevelopment efforts that we've been doing for several years, expand our downtown. We've got, great bookends with our downtown, our traditional downtown, and the development on 36th and France, and the apartment buildings in Hy-Vee. Those are great bookends. Infilling the middle to make it one great big pedestrian friendly experience was my number one goal until George Floyd was killed. At that point, it became number two. This is my number one thing that I want to work on as the mayor. And, and I've talked to mayors that I know in surrounding communities, and, we are looking at regional efforts. If I'm not elected, I'm still going to work on this as my number one thing. It's that important. I've lived through a lot of things in my life at my age, and I don't think anything's impacted me so much so fast as watching that video of Mr. Floyd being killed. I thought we had come so much further, and sadly I couldn't have been more wrong, and we have a lot of work to do.
Thanks for that.
Mm-hmm.
When should the city of Robbinsdale take the lead on social issues? When should a city wait for action at the state or federal level?
Well, I would even throw in the county level to that question. Any other government organization is basically your question, I think. And I'm not a big fan of using citizens' tax dollars to do other government agencies' work. I think we're much more better served working on things that can have an impact immediately on or in Robbinsdale and for our citizens. So it's, the answer to the question probably varies based on the topic. And the topic we're discussing tonight, I'm not interested in waiting for anybody. I think it's full speed ahead. Let's do everything we can locally and support those other government agencies in their efforts to improve racism and equity and equality, not just for the BIPOC community, but for everyone.
All right, thanks. What is your envision ensuring that all Robbinsdale residents feel safe and free from harmful prejudices?
For me, this boils down to communication. In order for any of this to get better, both sides are going to have to work at it, and not just casually. And that really starts by listening. And I like your format tonight, that the white participants have to wait till the BIPOC participants have a chance to get their questions in first. As with white privilege, some people don't think it is such a thing. Some people do. To me, it is. I'm a third generation or second generation American citizen. Nobody handed us, 35 acres of land or 1,000 acres of land in Oklahoma, 200 years ago or whatever it was. I worked hard for what I got and what I have, and my wife has worked hard, and my daughters work hard, and their husbands work hard. But at the end of the day, it's still easier for me to get financing, to get in front of decision makers than it is for minorities. And that's something that we need to continue to work on and continue to get better.
All right, thanks. If elected, will you find it important to allocate city funds towards racial equity programs?
It's absolutely yes. Securing racial funds for racial equity is important, but it's really going to have to be addressed on a case-by-case basis. You know, it's kind of, you know, what good for what people at what cost? Well, you know, they're at the end of the day, the cost is part of the formula. You can't do this stuff for free. And what are we giving up to do it? And I'm okay giving up a lot of stuff to make this better. But you know, I vote for the people I represent too. And you know, so there's a lot of homework that has to be done on the question. But the basic answer to your question is yes.
All right, thank you. And now we're on to our final question. Do you feel that the city parks and recreations of Robbinsdale serve all residents?
No, I don't think they do, but it is improving. You know, for example, the parks we redo now and like Triangle Park and Kelly Park near my home, just in the last couple of years, you know, those are adaptive parks where people in wheelchairs can gain easier access to them. But the answer to that being no is because we still have work to do, and every park is unique, and you know, part of it is getting educated on what are folks looking for. Several years ago, Manor Park right behind North Memorial Hospital, we were getting a lot of complaints about the basketball court there, and the Park Rec and Forestry Commission recommended to the city council, and the city council did take the basketball hoop out. That was the answer. Well, not too many years ago, I guess it's probably 7 years ago or so now, right here at Kelly Park, there's a basketball hoop, and we were having some problems with bad language and kids staying out there too late at night. And it's tucked away in a neighborhood where there's houses, you know, 50 to 100 feet away from the basketball court. I was asked, should we take this one down too? And I said, absolutely not. You know, let's take a different approach with this one. So I just went and I talked to the kids, and I have a couple of times since then where residents start complaining about the way some of the language and stuff, and I just go and I talk to them very, very reasonably, and I shoot some baskets with them a little bit, and it's amazing the cooperation you can get by just reaching out and saying, hey, you're probably not aware of the impact you're having on other people. Are there some of them that are jerks? Yeah, but most of them are great kids that really didn't set out to make other people uncomfortable, and they adjusted their behavior, and the basketball hoop is still there. And it gets a lot of use.
All right, thank you, George. We've now covered all the questions that the group has prepared for you. And now we're going to take some time to, for those here that want to ask questions and follow-up questions. So we're going to spend 15 minutes to do that. Holly, I want to make sure I saw you raising your hand. Do you want to speak first? No? Okay. All right, I'm going to start with the first question here from Melanie. How will you follow through on actions that the Human Rights Commission wants to take? How will you get the other council members and the city managers to buy in and actually do something?
Well, Melanie, that's a great question. You know, getting participation and buy-in, I can only speak to the current council because I don't know what the council is going to look like in 2021. But I know most of the people running pretty well, and I don't think that's going to be the problem. You know, that we're all pretty like-minded that we want to get this fixed, and we finally have, I hate to use the word incentive, but for lack of a better term, you know, we've got the incentive in the traction that the disaster and Memorial Day has created to make a move to go forward. And so I don't think it's going to be hard to get them. You know, the arguing part is going to be, what do we do first? You know, the sequence of events, and that's what that goal session is for. You know, we get together for 4, 5, 6 hours and talk through these things.
All right, thank you. We got a question from Aaron here. As other cities and communities have begun discussions about defunding the police, if the community members came to you as mayor expressing desire to move funds from the RPD to other programs, what would be your response? What would your response be to having these discussions and taking those steps?
Well, I'm open to the discussion, but I would want to know what's the alternate plan. Because my answer is going to be largely driven by what the citizens are telling me and what the alternate plan is. If the alternate plan is to not have a police department, I'm not going to be supportive of that. But I don't think, realistically speaking, that's anyone's alternate plan. But I haven't seen an alternative presented to me, a tangible one, to even have a thought of if it's better or not, because I don't know what it is. I hope that answers your question.
All right. Next question from Keith. What equity and inclusion initiatives has the Planning Commission submitted to the council? Over the years, they've done several things, but the most recent ones are this task force that we've talked about, and trying to find answers for the best ways to proceed and the best ways to get there as fast as we can. And then, like I mentioned earlier, keeping this moving forward, not just for 6 months, but for years and years, and hopefully generations to come. All right, thanks. If anyone else has any questions and you want to speak up, turn on your camera, wave your hand, and I'll unmute you. All right, I'm going to unmute you, Jan. Or try to.
No, it's me. I have to cooperate. Well, there was one more question, I think. Would you be willing to fire a police officer that has excessive complaints? How are these complaints tracked, and what rises to the level of an official complaint?
Yeah, thank you for that.
No problem.
Repeat the last part, Jan. I want to make sure I got it.
Would you be willing to fire a police officer that has excessive complaints? How are these complaints tracked? What rises to the level of an official complaint?
First of all, we don't have the authority to fire any police officer. One of the things, and this is kind of a shirt tail answer to your question. One of the things I want to do is review the police union contract language as it applies to inappropriate or unacceptable behavior and multiple complaints and things like that that surrounding your question. Having I want to have a relationship with the police union that puts us where we all want the same thing, and that is to have quality police officers policing Robbinsdale. And I want them to, be treated fairly, but at the same time, if we keep getting, it's just like in my business, if I keep getting the same complaints about the same dog groomer from people that don't know each other and are completely unconnected, that's a pretty big red flag for me as an employer. And I want the police chief that we select and the police union to agree with me that that's a fair way to proceed. And yes, the police officers' rights have to be part of that discussion, but it can't be so overwhelming. And I've had our own police chief say, we've had people that they've suspended because of things over the years, and they come walking right back in because the union language doesn't allow them to be terminated. And then the last part of your question, what escalates things to a level of this? I think anything that's physical abuse, obviously, is I don't have any tolerance for. I don't have any tolerance for racism, and if it's a multiple complaint issue for racism, I think that should be a terminatable offense. I mean, everybody can make a mistake. Everybody can have a bad day. But I think everybody that's on this or that is viewing this later has a job. And if you keep messing up and if you keep misbehaving, you're not going to have that job very long. And I don't see why the police should be any different. Does that answer your questions, Jen? Oh, you're muted again.
Unmute.
There.
Those were actually Melanie's questions.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Now for my question. That's okay. I didn't really preface with that. My question is actually the goal setting session that you had mentioned. Does that result in any kind of published, something published for the public?
Probably. Because I get it, I don't go to seek it out, I have to admit. But we look at Marcia, our city manager, has a big spreadsheet, and it's got all the different columns of the categories, you know, roads, capital equipment, park and rec, and all these different categories. And then every month, she highlights the stuff where there's changes, where we've made progress or we've had to modify our goal because of extenuating circumstances, things like that. And yes, I'm sure that's available to the public. I've never had to search for it.
All right, thanks. We got a couple more questions, some hard-hitting questions here from Kristen. Why was the response so slow and quiet from the city council after George Floyd's death? And if you could go back, how would you handle this differently?
That's a really good question, and it's a tough question because hindsight's really 2020. I think I would call for a special meeting if I could do it over again. We can't talk to each other outside of public meetings. For example, if I talked to the mayor about this, I can't talk to anybody else because that creates a quorum of the city council, and we can't do that. So we're kind of limited as to what we can do. I did talk to a member of the city council and only one, and they talked to me, so we couldn't talk to anybody else. I would have had a special meeting or called for a special meeting to give our response quicker. I mean, it's a very fair critique, but these are uncharted waters, and we discovered where some of the rocks are, and that's one of them is responding quicker. And it was just a matter of timing that we ended up having, like, what was it, 2.5 weeks or something before we had an actual council meeting. I was active more quietly than publicly. And again, in hindsight, I would have done that differently too. But nonetheless, that's the way it went.
All right, thank you. Question from Holly. What biases have you recognized in yourself, and what have you done to overcome them?
Oh, you guys are good. I think everybody has biases. You know, you have biases against the Green Bay Packers, and you have biases against all kinds of things. But the serious ones, you know, for me, I grew up in a home that was very racially inappropriate. The N-word flew around fairly regularly for my parents, specifically my father, and even grandparents. And that was just the way they talked. And I think because I worked in the cleaning industry, I became very aware of that early in my life, to the point that these aren't my biases necessarily, but they helped me navigate this water. Is I had to tell my parents that you couldn't see their grandkids anymore because they couldn't be exposed to that kind of language and that type of behavior. And to their credit, they modified their behavior. As far as my biases, I really like to now, sometimes when you're younger, you feel smarter, but you're not necessarily smarter sometimes. And one of the things I do is when I see somebody that I otherwise might not talk to, I actually seek them out. I go up to them when I have time and when it's appropriate. One example is, I was going to talk about this in the closing, but I'll use it now. I've gone for 4 times. I've gone on these Railvolution conventions, and it's for light rail development. If we get light rail here in Robbinsdale, we get one chance to do it, and I want to make sure we do it right. So myself and Bill and Dan Rogan have all been to some of these. I've been to 4 of them, and I was on a train in Denver with one of the Hennepin County Commissioners, Peter McLaughlin, and we were on a mobile workshop riding from station to station to so we could identify what we like and what we don't like about stations, because we've never designed rail stations before. So it's a great opportunity to identify things you like, and more importantly, identify things you absolutely do not want in Robbinsdale. And while we're riding along, there's a lot of time. And so I would just go up and talk to people that were I think almost exclusively of the BIPOC community. And I'd ask them, why do you use light rail? Why are you on the train today? And it's amazing to me, when I look at somebody and I go ask them, they look like they're a gang member or something like that. I just walk up and talk to them anyway. And I've met some of the nicest people that have told me I'm able to live in a better neighborhood. I'm able to have a better job. I'm able to go to a better school, and all because of transit. If it wasn't here, I might not even be alive because of where I would have to live. So, that's really helped me kind of overcome some of my own don't judge a book by its cover biases that we all carry.
All right, thank you. Got another question from Kristen here for you. Why should we trust you? That's question 1. There's multiple questions. So start with, I'll give you them all right now. So why should we trust you? Followed by, do you believe that there's a problem with racism in Robbinsdale? And are you committed to being anti-racist and supporting the anti-racist community?
Why you should trust me? Look at my record over the past 14 years. Look at my record over the past 30 years, my record of service to this community. I don't think all the other candidates combined have the number of hours I've put into this community as a volunteer. I'm not talking about city council stuff. I'm talking about whiz bang days. I was president of whiz bang days for 3 years. I got involved in whiz bang days when I was the Robbinsdale JC, and I made a really big mistake. Somebody asked us to help my wife and I to help out with the parade, and I made the mistake of saying, "Boy, was that unorganized." Well, it ran through our living room for the next 10 years because we were now in charge of it. So it's I think trust is earned, and I hope I've earned people's trust. Have I been perfect? Nope, I have not. But I'm always trying to improve. The second question again, Nick?
Do you believe there is a racism problem or problem with racism in Robbinsdale?
I absolutely do. I see it in big ways and small ways all the time. I see it sometimes in my employees where when somebody walks into the business and they act a certain way, and I address it with them. I say, you have to treat everybody the same that walks through the door until they give you a reason not to. Fixing it's the tough part.
Oh yeah. So actually that really feeds into this final question. So as part of this 3-part question is, are you committed to being anti-racist and supporting the anti-racist community?
The easy answer is yes. The support for the anti-racism community depends on what's happening or what they're doing at a given time. Do I support rioting and burning down buildings? No, I don't. Do I support protesting and things that are peaceful? I absolutely do.
All right, thank you. All right, Anne's got a question for you. I'm gonna unmute you, Anne.
Hi, George. Thank you for your time tonight. I'm a Bark and Bathe customer, so it's really cool to see you outside of that context. But
I don't have as much dog hair on me right now as I usually do.
Right. I think a question that's come up kind of across the nation right now in looking at politics is where have our politicians been on these issues of race? You said that you've been on the city council for 14 years, and we've looked a little bit about past initiatives that have come up and votes that have come up, and there really hasn't been much in regard to moving racial justice forward in Robbinsdale. And I know, this group just formed this summer due to the incident of George Floyd's murder. So I know that it's kind of new for all of us, but is there, have there been initiatives that have come up in city council that have been, just not looked at seriously? Has it not been a discussion?
And I think it's, the city council is experiencing the same thing everyone else is experiencing over the last, since Memorial Day. Prior to that, I talked about the simple example of the basketball hoop. That's something that came before the council, and we had two opportunities to address it. We addressed it one way, and then we addressed it another way. And I think that was a baby step in the right direction. And I'm going to take a little credit for that. But I also voted for taking the one down at Manor, so I can't take too much credit. At least I believe I did. I don't remember. It's been a while. We're always trying to get better. Is there more of it now than there was when I was on the council? Yeah, there's a lot more. I don't mean the last 90 days. I mean, in the last couple of years, we've talked a lot more about it than we have in previous years. But I don't think we really, I'm only going to speak for myself and not the balance of the council. I mentioned before how I was moved when I watched that video. And that changed everything for me. Not because of the election. That happened, and the election is happening, and they happen to be simultaneous. I would be equally motivated if there wasn't an election. If I don't win, I'm still on the council for 2 years, and I'm going to be equally motivated to continue this work as mayor or not mayor. I prefer to do it as mayor. I think I can be more effective. I can do more things regionally. I enjoy a great relationship with our state representatives in Ann Rest and Mike Freiberg. I enjoy great relationships with the mayor and city council, many of the council members in Crystal and in New Hope and in Golden Valley. I'm getting to know, or looking forward to getting to know the new mayor in Brooklyn Center. We've only interacted a couple of times very briefly, but there's a lot of this, we can fix all we want in Robbinsdale, but what I want to do is I want to see it go beyond the borders of Robbinsdale. And I think by working hand in hand with these other communities, we can make that happen. Thank you for coming to Bark and Bathe.
All right, do we have any other questions from the community? All right, if there's no other questions at this time, we have spent roughly 15 minutes as promised, and we'll bring our meeting to a close to ask George for a brief closing statement. And George, could you also tell us the best way to find you online, or the best way to continue this conversation outside this meeting? So I'll leave you with that.
I'll answer the last part first, and then I'll do my closing statement. VoteSelman2020.com is my website, and my email is there. All my contact information is there. My cell phone, 612-221. I never call it. It's on the website. And feel free to call that, and I answer my phone unless I'm sleeping, and even then, because I'm in the cleaning business, and most of that stuff, the problems happen in the middle of the night, not at 9 o'clock in the morning. So as far as my closing statement, I really, again, want to thank all of you for taking the time to do this, whether you're part of the group or just an observer. You know, time is the most precious gift we have because you can only give it once and you never get it back. These roundtables that I've referenced several times tonight, during one of them, this was happened to be a one-on-one meeting. This individual, Tony, I'm going to recant his story to me. He tells it much better than I do, but I think you'll get the gist of it. And he talked about, I was asking him, how do we get both sides to work together faster and more effectively, you know, so that we don't have sides anymore, it's us. And you know, that's the end goal for all of this. And he told me, he said, let me tell you a story about my dad. And his dad was in the Vietnam War, and he found himself in a foxhole for several days with, as his dad put it, West Virginia hillbilly redneck. Two people that had nothing in common and would never have had a conversation, but for the fact they found themselves in a foxhole and they only had each other to lean on for an extended period of time. If you wanted to eat, sleep, go to the bathroom, you had to rely on your partner to have your back. And you know, that created a bond between those two individuals. When they came back to the country and went back to base, their families ended up living next to one another because of the friendship that they created. When they were out of the service and they moved off the base, they ended up living, I can't remember if it was next door, but very close to one another. And these families grew up, not like the kids in one house or the other weren't friends, they were like cousins. And that's the way that family, a couple generations ago along now, still are today. What I want to do is I want to find a way to make more people have that experience. I don't want to use a foxhole to do it. And with that, I hope I've earned your vote. Please contact me if you have any questions whatsoever. Thank you.
All right. I want to thank you all for attending. And again, thank you, Mr. Selman, for your time with us today.
You're very welcome.
Yeah, of course. Everyone, please make sure that you are registered to vote. Vote early by mail, and be sure your ballot is postmarked by August 11th. If you vote in person on the 11th, please be sure to wear a mask and practice social distancing. Thank you. Have a great night.
Good night, everyone.